The crisis in Ukraine right now is calling us to uphold our values in not just this global conflict, but many that we'll find ourselves involved in. Obviously, what happened last week in the Oval Office is causing a rippling effect and a divide in our country and in the world. So, this ongoing war in Ukraine stands as a pivotal moment in the world, testing our commitment to international law and the defense of sovereign nations. As Russia continues its invasion, the United States faces a profound decision. Will we stand firm on the values that shaped our role in global conflicts like World War II, or will we allow the pursuit of political gain to undermine global security and stability? The stakes are high, as De La Soul said, and the decisions we make now will define the future of international relations for generations to come. Historically, the United States fought to eliminate aggressor nations, countries that sought to expand their borders through invasion. During World War II, we stood with our allies to stop Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan from violating the sovereignty of neighboring nations, including Russia. The parallel between the events of the past and what we're witnessing today is unmistakable. Russia, under the leadership of Vladimir Putin, is seeking to expand its territory by invading Ukraine. Yet, current President Donald Trump has openly criticized Ukraine's actions and questioned the necessity of U.S. involvement in this conflict. It's essential to reflect on the deeper implications of this rhetoric. While some may argue that Ukraine's demands for support are too great, it's important to remember the moral leadership that the United States once offered. This isn't simply a geopolitical conflict, it's a moral test. By pulling back support or offering weak resolutions, the West risks allowing Russia to seize valuable resources in Ukraine, including the region's rich mineral deposits. Should Russia gain control of these resources, it would be a devastating blow to Ukraine's sovereignty and the principles of international law. In considering how to address the conflict, some argue that if Ukraine's desire for security guarantees is too much for the US, other nations should step in and offer support. While the United States has long been proud of its military strength and global leadership, we must not trade moral leadership and international stability for the pursuit of military power. The conflict in Ukraine is a test of integrity as a global leader. Are we willing to risk the values that once defined us to appease short-term political interests? Some members of the political sphere, including J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, have pointed out that the reason for not resorting to inflammatory language when addressing Russia is to avoid escalating tensions and derail potential negotiations. While it's critical to de-escalate rhetoric in the hopes of brokering peace, the role of the U.S. as a democratic nation should never include siding with Russia, the aggressor, at the expense of our allies. The principle of democracy and the protection of sovereign nations should remain paramount. And people are saying that President Zelensky needs to apologize for his dress or his demeanor in the White House. Does anyone think that the U.S. should apologize to him for not allowing him in those closed door meetings prior to their time in the White House, or more importantly, for calling him a dictator, or for Vice President Vance saying that he is engaging in a propaganda campaign by parading people up to the front lines? President Zelensky of Ukraine has been placed in a precarious position. His request for security guarantees from the United States hinges on the idea that any agreement with the US should have real leverage. However, much of Ukraine's valuable resources are currently in territory either occupied or controlled by Russia, thus limiting Ukraine's bargaining power. If the US withdraws support, there's little incentive for Russia to negotiate peace. Instead, they may continue to solidify their control, making it increasingly difficult for Ukraine to regain its sovereignty. This dynamic is complicated further by the personal tensions between President Zelensky and President Trump. During Trump's first term, he pressured Zelensky to investigate his political rivals, specifically requesting dirt on President Joe Biden and his son. As tensions persist, it seems that Trump's vendetta may be influencing his decision to withhold crucial support for Ukraine, despite the ongoing human suffering and geopolitical instability. The situation has escalated to a point where President Zelensky has voiced frustration with the lack of meaningful progress. Now we have Trump withdrawing financial support. Um, Zelensky even described his meeting at the White House as unproductive, highlighting the immense challenge Ukraine faces as it tries to navigate this complex conflict. In light of this, Zelensky has expressed a willingness to negotiate peace. He has written a heartfelt letter to President Trump in the US, but the lack of clear support from the US raises serious doubts about the possibility of reaching a fair resolution. As Christians, we are called to uphold principles of justice, peace, and the protection of the vulnerable. In this conflict, Ukraine represents the oppressed, fighting to defend its sovereignty against an unjust aggressor. The question before us is clear. Will we stand with Ukraine and defend the values of peace, freedom, and democracy? Or will we allow political calculations to erode the moral foundation that has guided us through previous global crises? The war in Ukraine is not just a geopolitical struggle. It is a test of our integrity as a nation and as a people of faith. How we respond will shape the future of our international relationships and, most importantly, the moral character of our nation. Let us not forget the lessons of history and the call to stand with those who seek justice and peace in the face of tyranny. Because what we allow to happen to what we consider the least of us will eventually happen to the rest of us. Think about that, perhaps today.